You know that the Stanley Cup final, it started this past weekend. Game number one was Saturday. The Las Vegas Knights, yes, the Las Vegas Knights defeated the Florida Panthers 5-2. And someone who can help me break it down, one of the great voices and a great analyst of the NHL, Pierre McGuire, joining the Rich Eisen show. And Pierre, it was 5-2, but I just want to understand the electricity and how Las Vegas has brought this new life energy to the National Hockey League that it looks so much fun to be in that arena. What did you see from game number one?
Well, first, Kirk, it's really nice visiting you. Secondly, you're spot on about Vegas. It's an amazing sports town, but what it truly is an outstanding hockey city. It really is. It's amazing. I remember calling the first ever game there against the Arizona Coyotes. I remember clear as day when they had they hosted the NHL awards, and then right after they had the expansion draft, and just the expansion party afterwards was just phenomenal. It's well owned by the Foley family. Bill Foley's a tremendous owner. It's really well presided over by George McPhee. Their general manager is just, phenomenally off the charts. Their coaching staff is elite, led by Bruce Cassidy. I should have said Kelly McCrimmon's name, by the way, their general manager. I just take it for granted people know it, but I'll mention his name. And they've got star players, and what they have is a creative environment. It makes it so much fun, Kurt, for people to be at the game. It is truly a novel sports organization. It's something that a lot of teams in a lot of different leagues should follow and copy.
I agree with that, Pierre, only because having been to a bunch of Raider games in Las Vegas, it's not about necessarily the action on the court or on the field or on the ice. They turn it into an actual show in between where you feel like you're at a Las Vegas show, but oh, by the way, we actually get a game right in front of us. And it just so happens that the actual team is pretty good in the Vegas Knights. Them being in the finals, this is their second appearance already, but are you still shocked at how quickly this thing has kind of come together for the Vegas Knights?
I'm not. I broadcast the first final they played. They obviously lost to the Washington Capitals, and a great Capitals team led by their former coach Barry Trotz and Alexander Ovechkin and Braden Holtby in goal. I mean, it really was a great Capitals team. But what I'm not surprised by is the professionalism of the organization. I touched on ownership matters a lot, as you know from being a professional athlete for a bunch of different organizations. And I coached in a bunch of organizations, and I was part of one as a player for a short time. And ownership matters a ton. And they have phenomenal ownership in Vegas. They've got a mandate to win from Mr. Foley. And the people that he empowers to win, they do it. And they go out, and they're not afraid to make deals, Kirk. They're not afraid to go out and draft players that maybe other teams don't think are very good, and then eventually those players end up being pretty good. They sign a kid like Zach Whitecloud out of Bemidji State, who other professional teams could have signed, and nobody wanted him. In fact, one NHL team had him in a development camp and released him, and now he's become a very important part of their organization. So they've got a keen eye for talent. They're really well owned. They're really well owned. They're really well presided over, and they're really well managed and coached.
He's an NHL analyst. He's Pierre McGuire. The YouTube show, NHL Stanley Cup Central. You can find him on there as well. But what happened in that third period? I mean, this thing's tied up 2-2. Game one, I'm like, well, here we go. We're going possibly overtime. And then it was just the Vegas Knights pulling away, scoring 3 goals in that third period. What happened for the Knights to take over?
I think fatigue. Vegas is able to roll 4 lines, and their fourth line is really a big, heavy, physical group, and they lean on you, whether it's Nicholas Roy, whether it's Colasar. They just have a way of wearing you down. Will Carey is another part of that line, and I don't think Florida could really handle the 4-line pressure and the forecheck, so it wore them out in the third period. I talked about Zach Whitecloud before, Kirk. He scored a huge goal to start the third period, and then Mark Stone, who had 7 shots on goal, made a brilliant play to put them ahead by a couple, and then Riley Smith scored into an empty net. So, you look at it, I just think the pressure of the forecheck game from Vegas, the 4-line depth, and the ability to just frustrate Florida, I think, really cost Florida game one. And if Vegas can do that again tonight, it puts Florida in a tough spot. In the NHL, Kirk, you're never in trouble till you lose a game on home ice. So even if Florida were to lose tonight, I don't think they're in major trouble, but I think they're starting to feel some concern.
Yeah, I remember, obviously in the first round, them beating up on the, I don't want to say it too loud, the Boston Bruins. And I know that Brockman doesn't want to hear that from me as well. But there is this sort of sense that possibly Cinderella's carriage turning into a pumpkin, right? It has the magic maybe worn out when it comes to the Florida Panthers and how they just got into the playoffs and then how they've played. And all of a sudden they get to the finals, and could that magic be running out as they are now at the big stage?
I still think there's a little bit of fuel left in the magic that are the Florida Panthers. You know, the one thing that's really interesting about their team, they've obviously got one player in particular, Matthew Tkachuk,
yeah.
who can really help change a game, not just with his physicality and skill, but also with his passion for the game, the way he speaks, the way he tries to intimidate the opposition. And they've got another player like that in Sam Bennett. So they've got a lot of energy there. The truth is about the Florida Panthers, and I don't know how much has been talked about over the course of the playoff, but they've basically been in the playoffs since the middle of February. I mean, had it not been for a huge uncharacteristic meltdown by the Pittsburgh Penguins in the last week of the season when they lost to 2 non-playoff games with Chicago and Columbus beating Pittsburgh both, you know, that's what cost Pittsburgh the playoffs. Had those two teams not upset the Penguins would be in the playoffs, and we wouldn't even know the story about the Florida Panthers. So the fact they've been in the playoffs for so long, I think, Kurt, speaks a lot to how battle-ready they are, and I think that's going to help them in this series. I don't know if they'll win the series, but I think it will help them extend the series and make it tight.
You know, Pierre, what does this year's Stanley Cup final represent for you in terms of, for me, I'm looking at, if you're a hockey purist, you always think of the original 6, right? You think of the Blue Bloods that have been around for so long, but you see the success of the Vegas Knights. You see the success of even the Seattle Kraken, you know, teams that have just kind of come about over the last 5 to 10 years. And yet they've had more success, it seems like, than teams that have been doing it for so long. Why is that? What is this new brand of hockey that seems to be a little more exciting, but it's a lot of new, fresh blood?
Well, I think the fresh blood is great, number one, and expansion into key markets with good owners. I think about Tampa.
Right.
Until this year, they've been in the finals 3 years in a row. Brilliant. And I talked about ownership before. Jeffrey Vinik, he's not just a great owner in the National Hockey League. He might be the best owner in all of professional sport. He's just a phenomenal owner. He's a tremendous human being. He employs really competent people. And he's not afraid to enhance the viewing opportunity for his fan base down in Tampa. I use that as an example. You look at the ownership. We talk again about Seattle.
Right.
Brilliant ownership. Tremendous management team led by Ronnie Francis. I'm not surprised by what they're doing in Seattle. It's an outstanding hockey market. So Commissioner Bettman, our commissioner of the National Hockey League, has done a really good job identifying really important partners to join the league as owners, and it makes a big difference. It really makes a big difference. So I think there's a lot that goes into it. I've been in the league over 30 years, almost 34 years now, and I've seen it change significantly. And a lot of it's because of what Commissioner Bettman has done in terms of his vision for the growth of the league long term.
He's an NHL analyst. You can find him on the YouTube show, NHL Stanley Cup Central. Pierre McGuire joining the Rich Eisen Show. Kirk Morrison here filling in for Rich. The stage is all set for tonight, game number 2 between the Panthers and the Knights. What should we expect? What should the adjustments be? What should I be focused on tonight, Pierre?
Florida's got to play with a lot more discipline. They can't be taking needless penalties. They can't make it an easy game for Vegas. Vegas had 7 power plays in game number 1. They scored twice in 7 opportunities. Vegas played really disciplined. They only took 3 penalties. I think if they take 3 penalties per game, it's going to be a hard series for Florida to win, especially if Florida takes more than 3, and they took 7 in game 1. So that's something to watch for, discipline. Tkachuk, Bennett, and Cousins, that's the top line for Florida. They're going to have to really get going offensively. They had a really tough game 1, so if they're not going offensively, that's a problem for Florida. And I think the biggest thing for Florida is they've got to get their cycle game going. They've got to spend more time in the Vegas zone than they spend in their own zone. The other night it was the other way around. Vegas spent more time in the Florida zone than they did in their own zone, so that's something to watch for. But I would say that the biggest thing is just discipline. And Kirk, you know from all your years of playing football, whether it was at San Diego State or, your stops in the National Football League, the teams that are really disciplined usually, not always, but usually they give themselves a better chance to win.
Well, I got to leave you with this last one, Pierre. Is home ice really a thing? You mentioned earlier possibly not in a bad situation that Florida's in, but because of the way that the atmosphere is in Vegas, is it a real thing that is a must that Florida has to win tonight?
No. Home ice used to matter a lot more when we had different sized rinks. Now all the rinks are cookie cutter. Kirk, they're 200 by 85. And every single rink, back in the day when I was coaching or playing, you had the Odd in Buffalo, which was a house of horrors unless you were a physical team. The Stadium in Chicago, where I was fortunate enough to be part of the Stanley Cup winning team with the Pittsburgh Penguins. You look at the old Forum in Montreal, Maple Leaf Gardens, the Coliseum, Quebec, the Olympia in Detroit. I mean, they were all different. All the sizes of the buildings were different, so it was really, you did have a home ice advantage. Now they're all cookie cutters. So if you can get through the first 10 minutes, Kirk, you got a chance to win. And so that's where home ice kind of gets negated. The first 10 minutes, the home team better show up. If they don't, then the visitors got a real good chance to win.
See, Pierre, you sound a lot like the NBA finals that are going on right now. You know a lot in the first 10 minutes, so that's what I'll be focused on tonight, Pierre. Yeah. Appreciate the time, my man.
Oh, it's great visiting. And by the way, just a little San Diego State shout-out. A former teammate of mine, John Rice, his son plays football, did play football at San Diego State. He's playing the USFL right now for Memphis. His name is Kyrie Woods, and I'm a huge fan, so I know Kyrie's probably listening to you right now. I just want to say hi to Kyrie and all the great San Diego State Aztecs that are out there.
Oh, man, appreciate that. Kyrie as well. What's up, brother? Always go Aztecs. Aztecs for life. Appreciate it, Pierre. I'll be watching tonight, man. See you on your coverage on the YouTube show, NHL Stanley Cup Central.
Thanks, Kirk. Really nice visiting you. Take care.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.